Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Telikilaas forum, and my name is Aishat Suhuba, and this forum is based on the subject economics. And here right now there are three very experienced teachers with me in this forum. So I would like to get an introduction from this panel.
My name is Ahmad Madhi. I'm Madhi from Tajuddin School. I teach economics for grade 9 and 10.
I'm Ashraf Abdur Rahim. I have been teaching economics for around, let's say, 14, 15 years. I worked, at last I worked in the Hindi school. Now I'm working actually in NI.
I'm Srijit from Majidia School. That's it.
Okay, as we all know that this forum is to help our students and to clear their doubts and to give answer for their questions. So I would like to say the students, if they have any questions, if they have any doubts, they can clear it now, right now. Inshallah, we will be giving the answer for their questions. So I would like to start from the first questions. The first question is, explain whether a cut in income tax is a fiscal policy measure or supply side measure. Madhi?
Yeah, a cut in income tax is whether a fiscal policy or a supply side policy. So first of all, I would like to give the meaning of fiscal policy and supply side policy. Actually, the meaning of fiscal policy is the policy is adopted by the government, okay, to influence the aggregate demand in the economy by changing the government spending and direct taxation, okay. But the supply side policy is the long-term policy which influence the aggregate supply in the economy. So the term itself, we understand the fiscal policy is used to play with the influence the aggregate demand in the economy, but the supply side policies is used for the influence the aggregate supply in the economy. So when there is a decrease in income tax, okay, actually income tax is taken from income of the people. So when the government decreases the income tax, actually the disposable income of the people will be decreased. The disposable income in the sense that is the income left after deducting all the taxes and all the expenses, all right. So when the income tax is decreased, the people will tend to have more money or more disposable income. Actually, if the government actually decreases the income tax, people will tend to have more disposable income with them to purchase more goods and services. So the purchasing power will be increased, thus the demand for the goods and services increase and aggregate demand tend to increase. So the aggregate demand actually is the total demand in the economy. The aggregate demand consists of four components, that is the consumption, investment, government spending and net export. If any of the component of aggregate demand increases, then there will be an increases in the total consumption in the economy. So the supply side policies, the policies which increase just now, I said the aggregate supply. For example, the training and retraining workers. When the government provides the good education and training and retraining workers, people will be skilled enough to work in the different sectors of production. Sometimes they can work in the primary sector, in the tertiary sector, and in the secondary sector as well. So the workers will be skilled enough to work in the different sectors of production. Thus, the increases the total production would lead to increase in aggregate supply, like the subsidy, the financial assistance provided by the government. When the government provides this aid, the supply tend to increase. So basically, the supply side policies are the policies which increases the aggregate supply, but the fiscal policies are the policies which increases the aggregate demand in the economy. So when there is a decrease in income tax, it will increases the aggregate demand, which is the fiscal policy.
So basically it affects both the policies, right?
Yeah. Actually, in this question, let's say, as Madhi has explained, fiscal policy and supply side policy. This question actually focuses on whether whether. So that means the question itself can we can talk in both ways. Actually, income tax is can be a supply side policy. It can also be a demand side policy. The basic understanding is that the students will have to focus on government's intention, whether the government wants to increase the production or whether the government wants to increase the consumption. If the government wants, when they announce a cut in income tax, they will actually say that we are cutting income tax because we want to increase the disposable income so people will be able to buy more goods and services. Or they will say that we are cutting income tax so that people will be able to work more. They will be prepared to work more, so they will be able to offer their labor to the businesses so that they will be, the production will increase. So this, when the government announces a cut in taxes, they will actually say these things. So we have to, the question, the students will have to focus on the government's intention. So in this question, we can write so much, whether on fiscal side and also on supply side. The basic thing is that the students will have to focus mainly on the intention of the government. Whether they want to increase the production, then it is a supply side policy. Whether they want to increase or they want to increase this demand, so that is a fiscal policy.
Okay. And the next question is, what is equilibrium price and how it shifts? Madhu?
So actually the equilibrium price is the price at which the demand intersect with the supply. So equilibrium price, or in other words, it is also known as the market price. Okay, the market price is the price at which the demand and the supply intersect. Actually, that is the price at which how much the consumers are willing to buy and how much the producers are willing to supply. Okay, so I will show you the students how the equilibrium shows. So here, so when to show the equilibrium price, we need to show the market for a product or for good and services. Okay, so when you draw the equilibrium price, you need a basic frame to draw. This is the demand and supply diagram. Let's say this is a demand and supply diagram for chocolate ice cream. Okay, so this is the downward sloping. The demand curve will be always downward sloping, and the supply curve will be always upward sloping. Okay, so this horizontal lines represents the quantity demanded and supply, but in simple words, actually we can write the quantity traded here. Actually, the trading means the buying and selling. So in simple terms, we are writing the quantity traded, that is buying and selling. All right. So, and this vertical line represents the price of the goods and services. And here, this is the equilibrium price. Equilibrium price is the price at which the demand intersect with the supply. So here it is the equilibrium price or the market price. So this is the equilibrium price and this is the equilibrium quantity. Okay. So in this diagram, it shows the equilibrium price or the market price. Equilibrium price is the price at which the demand intersect with the supply. At this price, this is the number of goods and services that the producer is willing to produce, and this is the quantity demanded, which means how much the consumers are willing to buy. All right, and this equilibrium changes. Actually, the equilibrium would changes mainly due to the three reasons. The first reason is change to the market price due to the shift in demand, change to the market price due to shift in supply, and change to the market demand or market price due to the both shift in demand and supply. So basically, actually, because of the change in the non-price vectors, the non-price vectors which shift the demand and supply will change the equilibrium price. I can give you an example. For example, let's say when there is an increase in the income of the people, so when there is an increase in income of the people, people will tend to have more money with them to buy goods and services. Their purchasing power will be increased, thus the demand will increase and the demand curve will shift to the right. So we can show, so when the demand curve shifts to the right from D to, let's say, D1, see the new equilibrium is changed. Now this is where the new demand intersect with the supply, so this is E1, and you can see the price level increased from P to P1, the price tend to increase, and the quantity traded increases from Q to Q1. So because of the increases in the income, or else when there is a successful advertisement, let's see, when there is a successful advertisement about the product, the product become well known to the people. People will be more persuaded to buy the product, understood? So actually when the people are more persuaded to buy, the desire to buy the product tend to increases, thus the demand curve will shift the right. Likewise, the supply curve also shifted due to the shift in the non-price factor. So let's say with another diagram, the basic demand, let's say the quantity traded here, and this vertical line represents the price, and the demand curve always shows downward sloping, supply curve will be always upward sloping. So now I will show you an example of increase in the change in the equilibrium due to the supply, non-price factors affecting the supply. Let's say one of the major factor affecting the supply is due to the increases in the cost of production. When there is an increase in the price of the factors of production, such as increase in the rent, increase in the price of electricity, or increase in the wages, or increase in the any price of the any factors of production would increases the cost of production for the business. So at a higher cost of the production, the producers may not be able to increase their production as before, thus the production decreases. This decreases in supply, the decreases in production decreases the supply to the left from S to S1. Now you can see the equilibrium changes from E to here. This is where the new demand intersect with the new supply. So the equilibrium change from E to E1. Now this is the new price P1, and this is the new quantity Q1. So I would like to tell the students, when there is an increase in the demand and supply, or when there is a shift in only the demand or only the supply, there will be an extension or contraction happen. So here see, here in this curve, in this diagram, there is a shift in the supply because of the cost of production, but we can see here there is a contraction in demand from E to E1. This movement, this upward movement along the demand curve is known as the contraction in demand. So make sure that always when there is a shift in the demand or supply, or when there is one shift, the other curve will be having the movement along whether there is extension or contraction. To check whether it is extension or contraction, students have to see this quantity line. So when there is a movement along the demand curve, it will be always the quantity which increases or decreases. So when there is a change, non-price factors, when there is a changes in the non-price factors, the demand and supply will shift and the market price will be changed. And also sometimes both the demand and supply will change together. For example, let's say there is a successful advertisement about the product, at the same time government introduces income tax. So I will show you the last diagram. Okay, so this is the third reason why the market price change. It is due to the changes in demand and supply, both the demand and supply. So this vertical line, the price, and this horizontal line, the quantity traded, the demand and supply. Let's say here is the demand intersect with the supply equilibrium. This is the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So let's recall again the factor. When there is an increase in the advertisement, people will be persuaded to buy and the product become well known to the people. Thus the demand curve shift to the right from D to D1. At the same time, when the government imposes income tax, which is taken from income of the people, like I said before, when the government take income tax, people will tend to have less disposable income, where the purchasing power of the goods and services decreases. So the demand for the product will be decreased because of introducing the tax. So you see, now the demand and supply both shift. The demand shift because of increase in successful advertisement. The supply decreases because of the indirect taxation, such as goods and services. Okay, I'm sorry, students, when there is increase in income tax, it will directly impact to the demand. But if it is good and services tax, good and services tax or the corporation tax, actually tax is taken from the profit of the business, the supply will shift to the left. But if it is direct tax such as income tax, it will shift the demand curve to the left. So here it is the increase in advertisement and the demand curve shift to the right, and because of imposition of indirect tax such as GSTs or corporation tax, the supply curve shift to the left. So where is the new equilibrium? So here is the new demand intersect with the new supply. You can see the new equilibrium is here from E to E1. So the price level increased from P to P1, but the quantity remains constant. So actually the equilibrium price is the price at which the demand intersect with the supply. There are three major reasons why the equilibrium can be changed. That is due to shift in demand, shift in supply, due to shift in both the demand and supply. So the demand and supply curve will be shifted because of the changes in non-price vectors. Thank you.
Okay, I will go to the next question. And the question is, what is income and wealth?
Income and wealth, it's a simple question somebody asked. So income is a flow of earning. It may come today, tomorrow. So when people do any work or if they do any business. So income arises by the form of wage, salary, or if people do the business, they may get profit, or if somebody have a share in any company, they may get dividend. So these are called as flow of earning or income. So wealth is a stock of asset. So for example, my watch, it have a money value. So if we sold an asset, we are able to make money. So wealth is a stock of asset and income is a flow of earning. And the examples are wages, salary, dividend, profit, etc. for income. And wealth example we can talk about, it can be gold or it can be property or a car. So what is a stock of asset is wealth.
And the next question is, what are the examples for barriers to exit?
Barriers to exit is mainly affect large firms, especially it is a characteristic of, or it's a disadvantage of monopoly. When a large firm is try to leave from the market. So why are they leaving means due to some reason, some of the firm may decrease their total market share. So they may receive low amount of profit. So when they try to leave, being a large firms, they have a lot of difficulties. For example, some of the firm may receive tax incentive from the government, tax breaks. Yeah. So when they try to leave without a proper notice to the government, this extra incentive when they receive, it can be a subsidy, it can be a tax break. So this can be turned to a fine to the government. So they can't simply leave. Another, for example, there are special assets are there, specialized asset. For example, if it's a larger airline company, they have international license to travel different international locations. The same way they may possess a lot of aircraft. If this aircraft are a little old, they can simply sold it out because they can't find the buyers. So these assets, they can't leave it. So barriers exist are the difficulty when the large firm faced when they leave the market.
Okay, thank
And
you.
also, for example, let's say contracts.
Yeah, contracts
Contracts are also barriers to exit.
Yes.
If a firm has a contract with
Signed.
the government or others for other firms, with other firms, then until the contract is over, they can't leave. So that is also barrier to
Yes.
barriers to exit.
Thank you. And the next one is, explain what is vertical integration backward and forward.
Vertical integration backward and forward, that means, let's say, integration means joining of firms. So when the firm is joined with another firm, which is the firm which the firm is joining with, which is towards or near the customers or consumers, that is vertical integration forward. Vertical integration backward means that a firm joins with another firm which is near the suppliers or with the suppliers. That is vertical integration backward. So in this way, in this case, actually, when a firm joins with another firm, there is actually vertical integration backward for one firm and vertical integration forward for the other firm. The firm which is near the, for example, a retail shop or supermarket, a firm is joining, manufacturer is joining with a supermarket. So for the manufacturer, it will be a vertical integration forward. For the supermarket, it will be a vertical integration backward.
Yes.
So that is it.
Okay. And the next one is explain what is natural monopoly.
Natural monopoly, it is a born monopoly. Born monopoly means they have some typical characteristics. There are some firms out there, they are called as artificial monopoly. That means they create artificial barriers to enter and exit. They may not be any efficient monopoly because they had used some dirty tricks to remove the market competition. They may use price cutting war or better advertisement to tackle the new firms when they try to come to the market. So natural monopoly means some firms may have, some types of business need large startup cost. So only a few number of companies may come to business. So they are born to start such type of business. Another, for example, Microsoft. Until now, even in 2020, Microsoft have more than 70% of market share because they are the one first came to the market with the computer operating system. So who came first to the market? It may be due to a discovery or it may be due to an invention or with a larger economies of scale. These are the reasons a firm can become naturally a monopoly. Yes. Some artificial monopolies are they can be easily tackled by better competition, but they have used these types of firms may use different dirty tricks like price cutting war to but they may not be efficient.
Yeah, in addition to what Sir has said, let's take an example from Maldivian context. So let's say Stelco.
Yes.
Stelco, let's say if there is another firm or there are more firms than one, Stelco is distributing electricity in Mali. Let's say if there is another firm to distribute electricity, they will that firm also will have to incur the same or similar amount of cost to do the grid of let's say wires and capital like generators, and for all those things they will have to incur the same amount of cost. So let's say but if two firms are there, the amount, the revenue they receive will be divided among two firms. So naturally, only one firm is able to do the business in this context. Two firms cannot do the business. If two firms come in there, they will actually have a loss in this case. Mm-hmm. So actually, the natural monopoly depends on whether one firm is able to do the business or more firms are able to do the business on that basis. So in this case, only one firm is able to do the business without incurring a loss.
So they are born as a natural monopoly.
Yes, natural monopoly.
Yeah. And the next one is why deregulation is considered as supply side policy. Yes,
supply side policy, why the deregulation is considered as supply side policy? Actually, like there are many policies which increases the aggregate supply. Just before I said supply side policies are the long-term policies which increases the aggregate supply, like just now I mentioned the training and retraining workers, subsidy, sometimes promoting the horizontal integration and deregulation and privatization also. So these are the policies which increases the aggregate supply in the economy, all right? Mm-hmm. So the deregulation, the term deregulation means actually decreasing the rules and regulations, sometimes decrease in the paperwork or the rules are decreased. Okay, so when the government actually decreases the rules and regulations, it gives an incentive for the local producers to start up their businesses. Even the people peoples will be encouraged to start up their business, so it gives an incentive. So with that encouragement, more people will be desire to start up the businesses where the total demand in the economy will be increased. But how However, actually, if there is a more work to do to start up the business, more paperwork to be carried out, and more rules and regulation to be followed, so it will be discouraged. People will be reluctant to start up the business. Understood? So, but if the government decreases the rules and regulation, it gives an incentive, so people will be more encouraged to start up the business, where the total production in the economy tend to increases, thus the aggregate supply would increase. So the deregulation always encourages to people to start up the business and increases the total production within the economy, increases the aggregate supply. So it is a supply side policy measure.
Yeah, there is actually recently the government has decided to let's say to cancel all the if a business is registered, let's say as a partnership or as a company, before they had to take import licenses, they had to register it as let's say to if they want to actually start a shop, they have to take a license for that. They have to take a license for cafes and all those things. All these things have been now actually cancelled out. Now, if there is a partnership, they can start the business right away. So this is actually an example of deregulation. Now, without taking the import licenses, without actually paying extra money, there are regulations for shops to pay that, let's say, annual fees and all those things. So without paying all those things, without doing all those things, they will right away, they will be able to start the business. So the production increases. If the production increases, that is a supply side.
Moreover, that tobacco industries. Now we can see that all the that is tobacco packets are having pictorial warning. The damaged lungs, wounded mouth. These pictures are horrible. So I mean, because of this, I think this is last recently 5 years. These types of advertisements started. So it's a regulation passed by government to reduce the consumption. So when the consumption decreases, similarly the production also falls down. So if these types of regulations, if government can remove it, consumption can increase, and the same way production also can increase. But the problem, this is a demerit good, so government had to take these as rules. But rules will discourage the production. Deregulation will increase production.
Okay, we will meet after a short break. Assalamualaikum. Welcome back to the lesson. And the next question is, real GDP is the GDP at constant price level and so adjusted for inflation. The question is, explain what is meant by adjusted for inflation.
So real GDP is when from the total nominal GDP, we had to deduct inflation rate. Let me explain with an example.
Yeah.
So as we all know that GDP is a total value of goods and services produced within the country. So for example, a biscuit manufacturing firm, they produce yearly around 1,000 number of biscuits. So total number of product they produce 1,000 number of biscuits. And each biscuit they are selling at 10 rupiah rate. So 10 is the price and total number of product they produce thousands. So within a year, this biscuit manufacturing firm produced 10,000 total number of values of biscuit they produced. Next year, for the total GDP from this biscuit manufacturing company's contribution is 10,000 rupiah. Next year, suppose if it is a 2018, now 2019, biscuit company similar number of biscuit they produce, 1,000 number of biscuit they produced. And due to inflation rate, price they have increased 12 instead of 10. Now the price increased to 12 MBR. So total amount become 12 into 1,000 number of biscuit, it become 12,000. So its contribution to GDP become 12,000. But really, this company did not produce any extra product. So the real GDP used to measure economic growth, how much we have produced more than last year. So from this calculation, we cannot find out is it increased or decreased, because here it is shown 10,000, here it is shown 12,000. But the actual number of biscuits they produce only 1,000. So nominal GDP increased. So we had to find out how much extra price increased. So 12 is a new price, and before it was 10, the constant price without any change in price, base year price. So 12 divided by 10 into 100 is equal to 120. So the price index is 20. That means from the base year 100, 20% price change. So here what will happen means 12,000 is a nominal GDP divided by price index 120 into 100. So answer will be 10,000. So 12,000 is a nominal GDP in 2019 and real GDP is 10,000. So formula to find out real GDP is nominal GDP divided by consumer price index into 100. So then we get here what we did means 120, this inflation rate we adjusted and we got real GDP. So now you can give some little more information.
Actually, the question says that real GDP is GDP at constant price. Constant price means the price of base year, and nominal GDP is the GDP at market price. Let's say there the 120, the 12,000, 12 is the market price, 10 there is the base year's price. So base year's price 10 and market price 12. So constant price is 10, market price is 12. So nominal GDP therefore is that 12,000. So in this question, what is the meaning of adjusted for inflation means just removing inflation.
Yeah, correct.
Yes.
That means removing inflation. There we can see when the inflation is removed, the GDP is still 10,000.
So I can add one more formula to that. Like he used, there is a formula that students can always apply for the real GDP. Real GDP is the nominal GDP or the GDP divided by the CPI, Consumer Price Index into 100. That formula helps them to actually calculate the inflation. That is the nominal GDP divided by CPI into 100.
And the next question is related to this question, and the question is how the retail price index is measured.
Yeah. So how the retail price index or consumer price index is measured, or how the rate of inflation is calculated, that is the same question. So actually when the students answer the how the retail price index is measured, this question, there are some actually important key terms that students should remember always. First of all, they should know the meaning of retail price index and the difference between base year and current year, and also they should know the meaning of basket of goods and services and also the weight. And two formula is needed, that is how to measure the current year weighted index and how to calculate the average weighted index. So first of all, what is the retail price index? A retail price index measures the changes in price level of a fixed basket of goods and services commonly consumed by the majority of the household. Okay, so to calculate, let's say we are calculating the inflation between 2010 to 2018. For example, we are calculating the base year will be the 2010. The current year will be the 2018. So the base year is the year from which the index begins. The current year is the year for which the rate of inflation is calculated. Okay, and then what is the basket of goods? The basket of goods are the large number of commodities consumed by the majority of the households. And then after that, weight will be given. The weight is the relative importance given to each product in the basket of goods and services. The consumers spend more of their income, the more proportion of their income is spent to buy the more goods and services, will be given the higher weight accordingly. And then the current year weighted index. Current year weighted index is given the current year price divided by the base year price, multiply it by 100 and multiply it by the weight by using the weighted index method. And there is an assumption the base year weighted index is always equal to 100. And at last, to calculate the rate of inflation, the average weighted index will be calculated. It is calculated by dividing the total weighted index and the total weight. So after knowing these important formulas and key terms, students can form a explanation with the help of a calculation as well. But actually example or the calculation is not that necessary, but if they have more time they can show the calculation as well. So the first of all, the definition of retail price index, and then they can write to calculate the retail price index, their commodities will be selected, that is the relative number, a large number of commodities consumed by the majority of the households, and then the weight will be given. Weight is the relative importance given to each product in the basket of goods and services, and the base year weighted index is always equal to 100. But to calculate the changes in the price level, and to calculate the changes in price level between 2 years, the current year weighted index is calculated by dividing the current year price over the base year price multiplied by 100 multiplied by weight, and finally they have to calculate the average, that is total weighted index over total weight.
Yeah. So for these questions where they have to actually give the answer on related to the how the weighted index is calculated, how inflation is calculated, they can always use that table. In the table they will be able to show the calculation, weighted index and the price, weighted price, and the price and the inflation, etc. They will be able to show that. Okay. Yeah.
So to measure the inflation, it will be easy for the students to
use
use
the
the calculation.
But,
and
if
the
they don't have
table.
enough time, it is not even necessary. But it is better off to always apply the example, apply the calculation.
Sometimes the questions ask differently, like to measure it or to explain it. So in the explanation part, they can
if
write.
the question asks to how it is measured,
Yes.
then they will have to show the calculation.
calculation.
It is necessary.
Yes. Okay. And the next question is, what is the difference between long term and short term with examples?
So long term, the difference between the short term and the long term. Actually, a short term is known as the short period of time. In the short term, there is an assumption. In this short term or short period of time, the businesses will be having only one fixed asset. Okay. So in order to increase their production, they can only increase their variable cost. In the short run, there will be only one fixed cost. To increase their production, the businesses can only increase their variable cost, such as they can increase the labor or the raw materials, but they cannot increase their fixed cost. There is an assumption they can only have one fixed cost. But in the long run, all the fixed cost will be varied. Okay, they can increase their production by increases in the variable cost, or else they can increase their fixed cost as well, the machineries, and they can expand their businesses by actually expanding, and they can by integrating or by building the different buildings, or they can expand, they can increase their fixed assets. That is the main difference.
So the next one is, explain why a country need to reserve gold and foreign currency when there is a fixed exchange rate. Yes.
So fixed exchange rates only few countries in the world are following because it is very expensive. For example, in the case of China, around more than $500 billion of foreign currency, gold, then diamond. This is a precious commodities and currency they kept only in reserve to maintain the currency value. Actually, I need to explain with some diagrams. So if a country decides to maintain fixed exchange rate system, it is called currency pegging. They are matching their currency with another foreign currency. For example, if we maintain, suppose Maldives decide to maintain a fixed exchange system, we should keep currency and commodities in our central bank treasury. So for example, suppose we need rupiah, MVR, and suppose if we are pegging our currency with the US dollar, we need dollars in our reserve. And if we keep fixed exchange rates with the pound, we need to keep pound in our reserve, and either gold or diamond. Because when we are in short of any currency, then we can use commodities to buy. Because government is maintaining reserve, that is total currency and commodity reserve to buy and sell the currencies. For example, so even though if we maintain fixed exchange system, it will have international pressure from demand and supply. For example, suppose this is MVR, demand and supply for US dollar. This is a US dollar, USD supply curve, and a US dollars demand curve. At present, if we decided to maintain 15.42 is the currency value. So how much total currency needed to have a small influence on currency, that much we need to keep in reserve. That depends on country's total output value. For example, if we maintain around 100 million rupiahs, similar 100 million rupiahs valued dollar, pound, gold, diamond, extra will be keeping in our reserve. Now, for example, when more Maldivians decide to visit other country, we can't carry rupiah, we need dollars to buy. So from our foreign exchange market means it can be any place where legally our currencies are sold out. It can be a bank or it can be any foreign exchange market where people buy the currency. So when people go to other country, they may buy either any currency. If they buy dollar demand will be increased. Moreover, if we import more foreign goods, we can't use our rupiah. So we need foreign currencies. So this will make a pressure on demand curve to shift. So demand curve, if it is a floating exchange rate system, currency for the dollar demand will be available not at 15.42. We need to pay either 16 or more. So if we maintain a fixed exchange system, central bank uses this reserve to maintain the extra pressure. So here what happened when demand increased, there is a high push for demand. So government use an artificial supply of US dollar. US dollar is demanded. So this reserve, so which are the area, so which are the market dollar is purchased, where government will, some central bank will be supplying dollar and they will buy rupiah. So dollar supply curve also will be shifting right. So here price will maintain. So as demand increases, when a foreign currency getting strengthened, government will weaken the same currency by supplying it. So why government maintain foreign currency as a reserve mean? To influence the demand and supply, because it will have an international pressure. That will be maintained by using dollar or any currency which are they used to peg. They may buy artificial, they create demand, and artificially they create supply. That's it.
Yeah, actually in the current situation, the Maldives we have a semi-fixed exchange rate system, which is actually lower band is 10.28, upper band is 15.42. In the current situation, the source of income, the main source of our income is lost.
Yes.
Now the resorts are closed down, so we don't have any source of foreign currencies now. Shortage is there.
Shortages of
So
currency.
the supply of foreign currency is now very less. So because of that, there is an upward pressure on the price of Maldivian rupiah. That means the Maldivian rupiah is let's say devalued in this case, devalued. So nowadays they sell for 16.60 rupiah $1 like that. The price of $1 increases. That means the Maldivian rupiah is depreciated.
Yeah, so if we have the reserve of currency, that reserve can be used to reduce the value.
So the government is using the reserve now to increase the amount of dollars in the market. So that is where the reserve is important.
Yes, very good example you have taken, and I hope that a student have
Yeah,
got some idea of this topic, because most of the students find this exchange rate is the most difficult topic for them. And the next question is, What is difference between a negative economic growth and a recession?
Yeah, negative economic growth and recession. There actually negative economic growth is also let's say we expected 6 point something percent to grow in this year. Now the government is expecting the economic growth to be between 0 and 6%, minus 6%. So that will be a negative. If the economic growth or number of goods and services produced is less than the previous years, then it will be a negative economic growth. Recession is also a negative economic growth, but the recession means the negative economic growth continues for 6 months at least. When it continues for at least 6 months, 2 quarters, that is a recession. So there is a similarity and a difference. Negative,
difference.
all the negative economic growth, let's say this minus 6%, if it recovers within 3 months, let's say if the economy grows to 2%, plus 2% within 3 months, then it will not be a recession, but it will be a negative economic growth. Minus 6% will be a negative economic growth if it doesn't continue for 6 months. But it continues for 6 months, at least for 6 months, then it will be a recession.
So it has to continue up to
Yeah,
6 months.
recession
right?
means to continue, negative economic growth will have to continue for 6 months at
Then
least.
only it is called as a recession, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the next one is, what is a demand pull inflation and cost push inflation?
Yeah, the demand pull inflation and the cost push inflation. So I will use the diagram to show a table. So first of all, the demand pull inflation and the cost push inflation, which is the major two causes of inflation in the economy. That is the demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. Actually, there are 4 causes of inflation, but the majors are demand pull and cost push. Okay, that is demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, monetary inflation, and imported inflation. But the major 2 causes are demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. So, what is demand pull inflation? Demand pull inflation occurs when the aggregate demand in the economy exceeds more than the aggregate supply. So when this is the situation, when the aggregate demand exceeds more than aggregate supply in the economy. Like I said before, the aggregate demand is the total demand. It consists of the consumption, investment, government spending, and taxation. Consumption, investment, government spending, and net export. If any of the components of aggregate demand increases, the total demand in the economy will be increased. So demand pull inflation arises when the aggregate demand in the economy exceeds more than the aggregate supply. Okay, there are many reasons why this situation happens, why the demand pull inflation occurs. One reason is during the wartime condition. Okay, during the wartime condition, actually most of the countries they will use more of their resources to produce military goods such as bombs, guns. So these by using more resources to produce these military goods actually decreases the consumption of the consumer goods. The resources will be limited to produce the consumer goods. Therefore, aggregate demand exceeds more than aggregate supply. And the reason is because of the more export. So when the country produces the goods and services and they export that to other countries, the available goods and services within the country will be limited for the domestic residents. So the consumers, that limited resources may not be enough for the domestic consumers. So no matter how much the demand increases because of increase in the income of the people, the country may not have enough supply for the domestic consumers, where the aggregate demand would exceed more than aggregate supply. The third main thing is to achieve economic growth, which is one of the major economic objective by the government. To achieve economic growth, the country need to use more of their resources to produce capital goods. Usually they will invest more on capital goods such as machineries, the goods which are used to produce produce other goods and services, and there will be very limited resources to produce consumer goods which aggregate demand exceeds more than aggregate supply. So I will now show you the diagram, the best diagram to apply to when you show the demand pull inflation. Okay, so when it comes to macro, it is talking about the total demand. So instead of demand, the students, you need to write the aggregate demand, and instead of the supply you have to write the aggregate supply. So the basic frame also will be changed. This horizontal line will be representing the national output, which means the total output in the country, and then the vertical line, this line will represent the general price level, not the price. This talking about the general price level. Okay, so the aggregate demand exceeds more than aggregate supply. Like I said before, the demand curve will be downward slope in the aggregate demand, but the supply curve you will be using the long run aggregate supply curve. So this supply curve is known as long run aggregate supply curve. So aggregate demand tend to increases AD1 to AD2. So this is the price, this is the P1, and here the P2. So the supply remains constant. So in this diagram, so now you can see the diagram. So this is the equilibrium E1, E2, and E3. So this is the diagram for the demand pull inflation. Okay, so in this diagram actually students you can see that the demand exceeds more than the supply, aggregate demand exceeds more than the supply. Because of increase in the aggregate demand, only the price is pulled up, which is the demand pull inflation. So actually what happened is, if the country is operating below full employment, okay, so these 3 points you need to consider, the 3 points, that is full employment and below full employment and beyond full employment, that is after full employment. Okay, so if the country is operating at the below full employment, so this is the full employment point. Okay, after full employment point the supply curve become perfectly inelastic. So below full employment is this part, then after full employment the supply curve will become perfectly inelastic. This is the beyond full employment. So if the country is operating below full employment, let's say at this part, in this area, when there is an increases in aggregate demand, the country can increases their supply. Let's see, from aggregate demand increases from AD to AD1, the country will be having resources to increases their supply to meet up the demand. So when the demand curve increases, or when there is more demand in the economy, the supply can be increased. But students, there comes a point where the country can no longer increase their supply. So when there is an increase in the demand, the suppliers keep increasing their supply, of course. But there comes a point where the country can no longer increases their supply. We all know the main basic economic problem is scarcity. So if the country keeps increasing their supply to meet up the demand, after some point, let's say after reaching the full employment point, when the supply curve become perfectly inelastic, no matter how much the price increases, the country can no longer increases their quantity. The quantity remains constant here at Q1, but along with the increase in demand, only the price will be pulled up. But the cost to push inflation is because of increase in the price of the factors of production. Cost to push inflation occurs because of increase in the cost of production, such as the electricity or the labor cost, or let's say taxes. If there is an increase in the price of the factors of production, the cost of production will be increases, and the supply curve will shift to the left, and the price will go up. So basically the aggregate demand pull inflation occurs because when the aggregate demand exceeds more than aggregate supply, but the cost to push inflation arises because of increase in the price of the factors of production.
I'll go to the next question. The question is, what is difference in components in HDI and GPI?
Let's say in HDI, the students will have to talk about HDI. There is in the syllabus HDI is mentioned, but the GPI is not mentioned in the syllabus. The students will not have to actually answer any question regarding GPI. I think only 2 countries at the moment actually do this GPI. GPI means GDP
Plus external
plus external cost in simple way. Externalities included in GDP. So we remove that external cost from GDP, so it becomes GPI, genuine progressive index. That is in HDI. Actually, there are, let's say, 4 indicators and 3 let's say
life experience.
yeah,
Life
And
expectancy.
education index,
yeah,
literacy rate.
three components. Education index and education index is divided into 2. There is actually mean number of schooling and then the let's say
Then
the amount of
health index.
the health index is there, income index is there, that is GNI, health index, there is life expectancy, then education index, mean number of schooling, and also let's say the number of years, 25 years has gone to school, and also the number of years expected to for let's say 5-year-old to go to school. These two.
In GDP rank list, Maldives position is around 163rd. But in Human Development Index, we are very developed country. That means it's measure only the human aspects, especially health index, education index, and real GDP. Income index also measured. But GDP is only measured how much it is produced. So if a country have a more resource to produce like China, India, but in Human Development Index, that we are better than these types of countries. So Human Development Index is one of the best indicator to measure living standard, and GPI is no longer needed in our syllabus because it is a genuine progressive index. They need to know only for their information it is available.
Yeah. So in HDI there are 4 indicators and 3 dimensions. 3 dimensions are that literacy,
life expectancy,
education index,
And
life
we don't have
expectancy.
to include GPI, right? Because it is out of syllabus now.
syllabus.
But it is good that students have taken this question because they have to, they do not have to only actually prepare for the exam, but they have to get some knowledge also, right?
Yeah.
So it's good that they have taken it, but they have to be aware about the syllabus as well, right? Okay, and the last question is, this is I think a big question. What is the best way to manage the time during the economic exam? Because most of the students face this difficulty.
So time duration is around 2 hours 15 minutes
2 hours
for,
15 minutes for paper
paper 2 and 30 minutes for paper 1. So
45 minutes.
45 minutes. So better paper 2 if they can manage it. The first section I question if they can finish at 45 minutes, and remaining 3 questions for 20 mark. If they can allot for half an hour, the exam time they can finish it. So then if they attended 20 mark questions, so if they can spend around 1 minute to answer the 2 mark questions, around 4 or 5 minutes to answer the second 4 mark questions, and maximum 8 minutes, 8 to 10. Within that they had to finish the 6 mark question. And remaining time, they may around 12 minutes they can get to complete the last 8 mark question. So if this is the way, around 1 minute, 5 minutes, then 8 minutes, and remaining for 8 mark questions. So if this is the way they can manage, they can simply complete.
So if the students actually practice to answer their questions, the basic idea is they have to get 1 mark within 1 minute.
1 minute, yeah.
So at the end of the exam, they will have around 20 minutes. So they will be able to go and let's say see their answers, check their answers, and recheck their answers. Then if there is any correction, they will be able to bring that. So 1 minute, 1 mark. That is the basic idea.
And then paper 2 is there are two sections, section A and section B. In section A there will be a case study for 30 marks. Actually I recommend students not to use more than 1 hour. Actually they have to target for 45 minutes. It's 45 minutes for section A. Actually they can read the question and they can actually identify the key terms, and after that they can read the whole case study, so they can focus on the emphasize the areas that are asked in the questions. Likewise actually they can manage the time, and always they have to underline the important key terms and then they have to answer.
And there is very important thing in exams. Actually, when they have to write, they have to practice with the pen they are going to use in the exam. So if they have a new pen, new model of a new brand of pen in the exam, then the time actually they will consume a lot of time. So that is a time management technique.
So here pen also play a
Pen
big role,
play
right?
A big
That's a
role. And a
very big
pencil
role.
also, they
Yes.
cannot draw the diagram using pen. They have to use pencil to draw diagrams.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining this forum, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.